Well, the Hoosiers are hot. 3 wins in a row for Indiana, and they're right back in the NCAA tournament conversation, pushing on the right side of the bubble. Welcome back to the House of Hoosier podcast, presented by the Field of 68 Podcast Network. I'm Ian Plaskoff. He's Austin Platt. And Austin, this was a comfortable win. We're recording this the night of after the Washington game, and really first time in a while it's felt like a nice calm cruising victory, and Indiana's put themselves in a pretty good spot compared to where they were a couple weeks ago.
Wire to wire. It's such a good feeling to be able to back up the Purdue win really with two quality quad two wins in all honesty. Like without Malik Reneau against Penn State, that whole allergic reaction that we learned that was said over the radio before the game against Washington, missing out against Penn State, that was a game Indiana trailed for the felt like the longest time. You're able to make enough plays down the stretch to get a win in that game, which you needed. And then let's be honest, Indiana cannot really afford to lose these quad two games, considering all their losses this year are quad one, and kind of just that quad two loss kills you. And Indiana doesn't have enough quad one wins to kind of afford that quad two loss because it feels like one of those would almost counteract one, maybe two of the big wins. But regardless, go on the road on the West Coast. You got a really, really good win. First time in a while, like I thought to the Minnesota away game last year during that winning streak late on in the season. It's like Indiana took the lead early, come out to a big run, and you see it out all the way through. And I don't think Indiana felt like they never trailed in this game. That's just kind of how comfortable it was, and everyone's stepping up and doing the right things at the right time. And whether they're truly playing for Mike Woodson, they really lean into that in the broadcast today, or they're just kind of playing for each other, and everyone kind of knows that the seniors, it's their last, they're going into the sunset or whatever it is, whatever the mantra is. It's working, and everything's clicking, and everyone's on the same page right now. And you're a few wins away from, I think, really stamping your spot in the NCAA tournament. Not there quite yet, but we do know that Indiana will be playing in the Big Ten tournament. We kind of had a feeling that would be hard not to happen, but we do know the Hoosiers will be playing in Indy in a few weeks.
I want to start going back to the Penn State game because this was an interesting one in that there was no Malik Reneau. It felt kind of off. It's always these Penn State games that just have a weird vibe to them. But Indiana did just enough to come away victorious in this one. It wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but the late game execution was better than it has been before. And this was another one of those games that you just cannot afford to lose. And guys stepped up. Umar Bala was terrific. The defense late was great. Trey Galloway had another solid game. Um, just general thoughts from this Penn State game. I mean, I was pretty happy with it. It was kind of just one that you want to get past rather than focus on and make the rest of your season about. It was kind of the stepping stone to the rest of the season in my eyes.
Yeah, we mentioned it that a loss to Penn State would counteract the Purdue win, and even I think without Malik Reneau, that still would have stood. But I mean, Penn State came out firing in that game, and Ace Baldwin Jr. is such a good player, really on both ends of the floor. Defensively, he was great, kind of almost pickpocketing, a bunch of guys. Galloway, I think Rice had, I mean, between those guys, they had 10 turnovers, and he was great. And finished with 22. The student section was all over him, just because I don't know what necessarily the disdain is for a guy like him. It's just he's pesky. He's kind of like those Rutgers guards over the years that like win Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, and they don't kill you offensively with threes or anything like that, but they're fast, they're quick, then they know when to probe. And Ace Baldwin Jr. is right up there, and we knew he'd be that guy when he came over with Mike Rhodes. Now in year two, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year last year, and could very well has a case to win it again. Although Anthony Leal has had another solid game today, regardless. Yeah, I mean, this is just like Indiana's bench came up big. I mean, Miles Rice with 13 off the bench, again, allowing him to get downhill, and including this game against Washington, the ability for him to just knock down a few threes early changes the entire complexion of this offense. And I've been the biggest, like, not Miles Rice hater, but I've been like one of the hardest people on Miles Rice this year just because of the turnovers he has at times, or the late game execution stuff, not taking the right shots. That's been the biggest thing that's irked me. But I mean, there are times when Indiana has gone away from him when he turns the ball over once or twice early. I think that Northwestern game was a great example. Like this, he has the ability to get downhill and be really dangerous and either dump it off to, a Balla or a Reneau right there for an easy dunk or layup, or kick it out to a corner three for a guy like Goody. And in a game like this where he is able to make threes, and then you got guys jumping in the air and allowing him to get downhill and make that pass, he is just that much more dangerous. And he was big really in both the games that we'll talk about. But his 13 off the bench, and I mean, Penn State was in foul trouble a whole bunch during this game. Indiana took a 25 free throws. It was a very physical game in that second half. But I mean, Balla with 20 and 12, stepping up, huge 5 assists as well without Renew. I mean, it's the one big lineup which has worked all year long, and there was only 4 minutes when Balla was not on the floor, and boy, it was just a gutsy victory. And you're right, one that you just kind of look at it, and then you quickly hop on a plane the next day and go out to the West Coast, and you can whether it's looking at a lot of Penn State film or looking at a lot of the film upcoming for the next game. Just a huge win overall, and everyone contributed. That's the most important thing for me. And even Kaden Carlisle knocked down a three. The classic no, 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 yes is always when I see Kaden Carlisle rise for a three, or even like a mid-range jumper like we saw against Washington. But regardless, everyone who played. Langdon Hatton, 2 fouls in 4 minutes. Okay, maybe not, but everyone else made an impact, and that's what you have to do, considering, there were 4 guys on Penn State who had 0 points themselves, and Kern was the only guy who had points off the bench. And this time we figured out the whole foul situation is DeMarco Dunn actually fouled out, unlike the Purdue game. We couldn't figure out who fouled out, but gutsy victory. Just, one of those games where it felt like the UCLA game. Indiana's down a bunch. You're down by 2 at half, although it felt like it was. I felt like Indiana was up. Like the people I was sitting with, I was like, the halftime show felt great. I forget who it wasn't. The Firecrackers was the Purdue game. Whatever the halftime show was decent. But it was like, man, I feel like Indiana's up right now. Like the vibes are good, and it just never was that way. And finally, you take the lead. Galloway hits a huge. Those 2 back-to-back threes. That second three was one of the loudest that place has been all year, and you could just tell everyone deep sigh of relief and move on. And Indiana has turned the page nicely.
Austin, do you remember earlier in the year when Indiana played Penn State the first time, what I was talking about with the 3-point numbers and how whatever team wins the 3-point battle usually wins the game?
Something like that. They usually make
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
This was another one of those. Indiana was lights out from beyond the arc, 10 for 15 on the day. For those of you folks that are not the best with the numbers, that's 67% from three. That is ridiculous. And Trey Galloway was great, 4 of 5. He hit a couple of big ones. Luke Goody was 2 for 3. Um, so those two had 6 out of the 10, and then you got uh, two more from Miles Rice, and then one each from Caden Carlisle and Mackenzie Mbako. Penn State really struggled to find any offensive rhythm in this game for the most part, although it was close pretty much the whole way. But when Indiana was hitting threes like that, I mean, there was just nothing that you can do. And they were not just any kind of threes, they were timely threes. It felt like whenever Penn State was going on a run or whenever Indiana had a chance to break it open, they hit threes. Now, they didn't shoot the greatest from the free throw line, but if you're looking at the free throw, 3-point, and field goal statistics on the splits, it's going to be the latter two that are going to matter the most. And Indiana definitely capitalized there.
Big time. And the other thing I was thinking was like, during this game, at some juncture, I was like, who do I actually trust to like knock down threes right now? And from coming into the year, the guys who we thought would be the main 3-point scorers, Mbako and Goody. And Goody only took three, and he had a great game against Washington, but was kind of like having a little bit on a skid. I think the UCLA game, he wasn't fantastic. The Purdue game, he's been much better, but he kind of this middle to end stretch of the season, he's been a little bit up and down. But it was like, man, I trust Trey Galloway the most right now to make threes. That's exactly what I was thinking, like halfway through the second half. And I'm like, man, that is just not normal because when he's had the higher volume this year and going back to last year as well, he just hasn't been as good. And boy, he stepped up big. And it's just the seniors again stepping up. And Galloway, man. Remember when the fans booed him during whatever game it was when he was subbed out? I forget what home game it was, but for playing poorly. It might have been that Illinois game because everyone was booing, but regardless, like he has stepped up in such a big way. 9 assists in this game. Just the assist numbers have been off the charts. His defense, I think, has improved as well, and he's clearly part of this senior class that is trying to make a big difference. And Galloway is the only guy on this roster, I believe, that was here before Woodson, and he was one of the few guys that stayed around for the Woodson regime. And you got to give credit to him for kind of sticking it out. I've said this all year. He had no business staying at IU for coming back for another year, and look what he's doing, kind of anchoring at times, being the main ball handler for a team that is in the right direction to make the NCAA tournament.
It was Galloway and Leal that were here before Woodson, but if you group those two together, it makes so much sense because those are two guys that are playing at the highest level they've played, and it's because of their coach, I feel like at least. But specifically on Trey Galloway, I think I've made this pretty clear earlier in the season that I was not too much on the same fan level as most people were with Trey Galloway. I thought he had a lot of room to grow, let's say, earlier in the season. But he's completely turned me around. I think this second half of the season, this stretch has been some of the best basketball I've seen from Trey Galloway. He has been tremendous. He's kept Indiana afloat. I mean, you look in this game against Penn State, Indiana won this game by 5. We've talked about plus minus numbers all year, and you know, we don't know exactly how much of a factor this is in the direct impact of the game. But you look at everybody, like in the positives, it's in the 4 to 6 range. Miles Rice was a +8, everybody else 4, 5, 6. A couple of guys in the minus numbers off the bench, and then Trey Galloway a +16. I mean, it may not be a direct indicator of what Trey Galloway did in this game, but it sure looks like it at least is a pretty good idea. Because Trey Galloway was huge. I think he was the main reason why Indiana won this game, why Indiana stayed afloat. Um, and he did, I mean, this was a vintage Trey Galloway performance. 16 points, 6 of 11 from the field, 4 of 5 from three, 3 rebounds, 9 assists. Did have 6 turnovers, but when you have the ball in your hands that much, it's probably going to happen. Same thing happened with Rice. Rice and Galloway combined for 10 turnovers, but it didn't matter because Indiana won this game. They outscored Penn State on points off of turnovers, 18 to 10. Um, and other than Galloway and Rice, there were only 4 guys or 4 other turnovers. So, I mean, I'm going to look at the effort stats here. You can look at the shooting splits all you want, but the effort stats, points off turnovers, Indiana won 18 to 10. Rebounds, Indiana won 30 to 23, 8 to 4 on the offensive glass. Assists, it was 24 to 14. Like this was a team performance at the highest level, and it was a really good thing to see from Indiana.
The plus 10 and assists is the biggest thing for me. Like Indiana is at its best when it's moving the ball around. If you're not necessarily, if you get that post touch and that double comes, you're able to find the open guy. Maybe it's not the first pass, it's that second pass, and you're able to fire a ball across and get an open shot or get it to a guy like Mbaka or Rice who is willing to drive and put the ball on the deck and go in for that tough bucket. So the assists for me, I mean, you make 29 shots, you get 24 assists. You're winning a lot of games when the statistics are that good. And I mean, the Niederhauser, they're big. Penn State's big was incredible in that first half, like unguardable, just too big. And it's like, man, there were times like he will step up and like he almost like attempted a long mid-range jumper or three, and Bala like leaves his feet, and it's like, oh boy, like he's going to the rack, and Bala was not catching up to him. So. And he did a good job adjusting to him a little bit, trying to, get those touches almost a little bit deeper to prevent Balla from moving, I guess vertically up and down as much. But yeah, just a good like feel good team win, and yeah, you had to move on quickly because Sunday afternoon you win. This is a Wednesday night game, 8:30 tip. And obviously with the TV schedules, you can't control it anymore. But obviously, I was not the biggest fan of that to be honest. But I was ha happy to go. My final time inside of Assembly Hall for as a fan for any reason. So it was good to go out with a bang, and I was thinking like I was there the very first time. It was easy against Eastern Michigan in Mike Woodson's first game where Indiana barely won. in a game they were up big and almost let it go. And it's kind of like the same thing. I think it was also a 5 point win. So kind of full circle for me, and glad they left with a win.
I wasn't able to go. I was watching the game at home. My roommate and I actually went on a call with our friend that goes to Penn State, and we all watched the game together. So that was fun. But last thing I want to say from this game is late game execution. We've seen it as a problem throughout this season for Indiana, and Indiana didn't actually shoot the ball well down the stretch. No field goals in the last 233. That was in part to the foul game being played. But Penn State, two of their last 10 from the field, 0 of their last five. Indiana's defense down the stretch was great. It was tremendous. And the Hoosiers did just enough to come out victorious in this one.
Yeah, squeaking across. This was closer than a 5 point game throughout, and the largest lead for Indiana was 7. The largest lead for Penn State was 6. So I mean that just shows you how close this game was.
We'll move on because this game, you can win it all you want. It's Penn State. But if you win this game and then you lose the next game against Washington, that Penn State game and another game really don't matter for anything. So this game tonight, well, earlier tonight, we're recording this night after, against Washington was important. And from the jump, it just felt like Indiana had everything rolling. It was just a joy to watch. There was really nothing to complain about. It was a nearly a wire to wire win. Um, and this was one that it was the first time in a while that we could kind of just sit back, relax, and watch Indiana basketball take it home.
So much fun, man. I was like kind of forgot Indiana was playing. I was like 6 o'clock, like ugly time for a tip. And Indiana's the last Big Ten team to go out west, men's or women's. So it was like you don't know what it's going to be like. Late night Wednesday, grind it out win, and then all of a sudden you got to hit the road, adjust the time zones, do all that stuff. And Indiana came out and just blasted Washington, just completely punched them in the mouth. Came out early, dictated the tone, which I think was the biggest thing. And Reneau was, oh my God, I mean, what a blessing to have back. 22 points, his best game this season, 10 of 13 shooting, 6 rebounds, a pair of assists. Did have 3 fouls, one of them on an illegal screen early. But I mean, boy, just to have him off the bench and Miles Rice as well. Indiana had bench points 35. So 35 of your 78 points coming off the bench. I think the best mark all year, bench points wise. And boy, it's just you set the tone early and you win this game wire to wire. And boy, it was fun. Like there was a little bit like Indiana came out flat to start the second half. But I mean, if when you bottle up the opposing team's best player in Osabor, who had only 4 points, all of them from the free throw line, off 0 of 5 shooting. I mean, he was just horrendous around the rim today. Um, you're gonna have a really good chance of winning. And I know everyone's like, oh, you got to split this road trip, but it's like you really have to win the quad two games because having a quad two loss on the schedule with the lack of quad one wins that you do have at the moment would really, really hurt you. So you're great. You get this win. You take the pressure a little bit off for that Oregon game, but as it stands right now, it'd be Indiana and Oregon in the Big Ten tournament. So it's like it could be 2 games in a week for those two schools, but. Um, really happy. For the broadcast was really like just completely all over Indiana, like in a good way. Like, oh, Renew's this great player. Miles Rice is back in Washington, and I was like, man, this is fun. Like people actually enjoy watching Indiana basketball, and everyone's like, oh, you don't want to see this team in the tournament. I'm like, I can get into that. Like, all right, fire me up. So, fun to watch this one, and a good way to. It's been a great day of college basketball on this Saturday, first day of March. Happy March, everybody! First off, but awesome way to start the road trip.
I think the thing that deserves the most time out of this Washington game, those uniforms, man. Those
Ooh.
were sweet. That was a surprise. I opened Twitter before the game and I saw pictures from warm-ups and like, wait, Bryson Tucker is wearing black shorts with candy stripe kind of trim on the ends. I'm like, this could be interesting. And it was. It was they were I was expecting them to be the exact same as the one that the women's basketball team wore earlier this year. They weren't, but I kind of liked them a little bit better.
Yeah, I thought it was really neat. Like, I don't, not a big person in the whole merchandise game. I know I think I speak for many when people think Adidas is not the right brand to partner with, but regardless, those were sick. Like it looks a little weird, I will say, with the guys on the bench wearing the candy stripes with the black uniform. That did kind of look a little bit out of place, but other than that, it was really cool. Just a neat environment, like, and yeah, I mean, the whole unannounced thing, I kind of like it. Like, it's just a surprise. You go out west, all right, you can kind of hide this. Not as many fans, media out there, and what do you know? It's a new look, and this is like a new look Indiana now. It breathed a new fresh life with the month change, the month flipping over to March.
It was weird because we're seeing Indiana play a conference game in a place they've never played a conference game in uniforms that they've never worn. It felt like kind of like a either a preseason game, like a tournament game. It just didn't feel like a regular basketball game because of that. I don't know how to describe it, but with so many new factors, it just didn't feel right. Did you feel that?
The only thing we were missing is like an 11 p.m. Eastern tip. Like that would have been
Yeah.
perfect. Like that on Peacock with those uniforms and that atmosphere was like we really added Washington to the Big Ten, man. Like for basketball, like this is what we're stuck with. So no, but no, I loved it. Loved every part of it. And I think a lot of the fans did too, considering there was I know that they can't kind of got rid of the other uniforms that they were gonna wear for Black History Month, but these were dope.
I'm going to move on to the actual basketball part of this game and focus on the bench points a little bit. 35 bench points, and we talked about, after Malik Reneau got hurt against Rutgers, we talked about moving him to the bench, extending the lineup. Then Miles Rice gets benched, which may be for the better, honestly, and you put both of them out from the bench, and this team is so much deeper. The Indiana was never scoring 35 bench points, and it worked with the one big lineup. It worked with those two guys off the bench, and this team didn't have any drop off. And then you pair that with some guys like Leal and Goody who played 34 minutes. It was just I loved the rotations tonight.
This is the best rotation we've seen in a while, and it's so like Renew and Ballo, like whoever starts in the minutes and the production is so interchangeable, which is just like I never expected it to be really this even in terms of minutes, in terms of production. I came in like, all right, Ballo's like the main big, and with Renew's, defensive at times and capabilities, and we saw a little bit of that. He had, three fouls, but I mean, he didn't even play on Wednesday night, so it's like you can't even blame him. And I think there was at least one of those I think was definitely questionable, but regardless, like both bigs did their own, and Balo only 7 points. It was like you practically didn't even need him to win this game. I mean, he only played 15 minutes, and Renew off the bench played 25. It's like this is the minutes like comparison and the way we said at the beginning of the year, like it should be 25 and 15. Like no matter which way it goes, this is the way it should be. And when the guards are playing as well as they are, and you're getting the right guys shots, and you're taking enough threes. I mean, 23 threes where they only took 15 against Penn State. Like, got to take more threes in this modern age of college basketball. And Indiana did that and shot the lights out in the beginning. And, in the blink of an eye, they were up by like 15 points. And it was like, I don't think, Washington has enough scoring to get back into this game. And for as much as Indiana struggled to begin the second half, Washington just does not have enough, especially from beyond the arc. They were just 6 of 23 in this game. And boy, just wire to wire. I mean, not that there was much of a crowd anyway, but it took whatever energy there was that was out of that building in a heartbeat. And this is the blueprint for this team. And this team is a lot better when you have more guys that and more productivity off the bench. So I mean credit to the coaching staff again for kind of sticking with it. I know it's kind of changed a little bit, whether Mbako or Rice starts, or it's kind of I feel like the starting lineup in the last like 6 games is I feel like it's been five different starting fives. But at this point, I don't care because as long as the minutes are the same, who cares who starts and who cares who comes off the bench? Because we could have basically said Malik Reneau was a starter in this game. He came off like 5 minutes into the game and. Balo had three fouls, and at time it was tough down low against Osabor early, but I mean the defense against him was great, and yeah, defense overall, you did great job on the rebounding. Outscored them on the glass and bench points and points in the paint. You kill them both there. This is not a team that's going to lose. Again, 16 assists on 30 made shots, just 8 assists for Washington overall, and they Indiana held on to the ball for the most part. Free throws were okay at best, but who cares? You have way more than enough outside shooting, and you get Goody and Ibaka going. Having both those guys get over 50% from three was really big, considering Ibaka has felt like at times has been invisible as of late from three, especially. So, yeah, everything went right in this game, wire to wire, and you needed this win, and I think you needed the the margin as well. 16 points was big. It was up to 20, I want to say at one point, but it's like you don't Indiana teams, earlier this year, like Indiana goes up by 20, they win this game by 10. Like, but no, you win this game by comfortable 16, and just like that, you can look at the metrics, and this game will really help by you as much as Washington stinks and they're at the bottom of the Big Ten. This game may have, I don't know if they're like confirmed, like not going to Indianapolis and out of the Big Ten tournament altogether. They're the only team in the conference that's under 500, but you buried a team that was in the sand, so good on you.
This was a full-on team performance. Nine guys played, eight of them scored. And I want to focus on the one guy that didn't score. Anthony Leal, 0 points, 0 of 1 from the field, but a plus 26 in 34 minutes. If that game doesn't describe Anthony Leal, I don't know what does. You don't always have to score to play well in college basketball. We've said this all year. That game from Anthony Leal was the epitome of that statement. And I mean, what an impact he made. 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, 3 steals, a plus 26. Tremendous defense throughout the night. Can't speak more highly of Anthony Leal in this one.
Yeah, this is like I was never like thinking Anthony Leo and Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year conversations, but like we can start to maybe have like put him in the conversation at least. Like, I mean, he deserves a spot at the table. Let's put it that way. But whether he's sitting in the middle or he's sitting on the end of the kids' table, he deserves to have a seat. And that's exactly the performance that he put up just does it little things right, and just a player that never gets enough credit in the box score. And Mike Woodson has always leaned on the defense. The broadcast mentioned it, kind of that old school mentality that defense matters. And Anthony Leo is a winning player. There's no doubt about that. And in a game like this, on the road, not I think Miles Rice is maybe the only player that has had played in the state of Washington, let alone maybe on the West Coast at any point in his college career. So good on Leo for stepping up big time. And again, the seniors did a heck of a job in this game. I know Galloway did not play well, at least shooting wise, but had 7 assists. But it's just that group that they've stepped up so much. They've been more vocal, excuse me, and they prove that they care just as much as anybody else. And when you have a guy like Malik Reneau to back you up with 22 points, and I felt like he made the first like 8 or 9 shots that he took. It's incredible how much this team has kind of almost pivoted around those three guys that we mentioned, and Leo Goody and Galloway, and to have a defensive player like that on your team. And to be honest, like there were some shots that Washington hit that either Leo or Galloway were guarding. It was like there's a hand right in your face with 3 seconds left, and you hoist and it goes in, fine, tip your cap. But just to have the ability to not allow teams to run you off the 3-point line, which has been the issue really throughout the Woodson era, and to have someone like Leo right there for you is just it's crucial. And every coach knows it that having a guy like Anthony Leo matters. And everyone says great things about Leo, even though he's got like just 70 points or so this year. Proves that the defense matters. And hey, defense wins championships in the very end. This defensive performance for IU as a whole, just giving up just 62 points in a game that was essentially over with like 5 or 6 minutes left, is a really, really good look.
Leo Goody and Galloway. What is the connection between all three of those guys?
Indiana guys.
Indiana kids. They understand what this program is about. They may not have always played at their highest level throughout this season, but when it's mattered, they've stepped up. And Luke Goody tonight, from a scoring perspective, 18 points, 6 of 11 from the field, 5 of 9 from three, made some effort plays as well. He was a plus 23. Leal again was a plus 26. Galloway was a plus 16 with 8 points, 7 assists. Limited the turnovers today, only one in his 24 minutes. It was the Indiana kids again, but of course, you can't leave out Miles Rice and Malik Reneau in this game. Reneau in particular. I mean, I don't know what, maybe the allergic reaction fueled him in some kind of way because this was the best game that he's played all year, in my eyes. 22 points, 10 of 13 shooting, 6 rebounds. He was a plus 14 in 25 minutes. 3 fouls, 3 turnovers, but those didn't really matter too much. This was a complete performance from Indiana. They got contributions from everybody, even Caden Carlisle and Langdon Hatton. And I couldn't be happier with this win. It's a big one. I'm happy that they didn't give up a little Washington run at the end to make that score a little bit more respectable, as you said, Austin. But yeah, these guys, it feels like they found something that clicked. Feels like they have a reason to fight now. It looks like it on the court for sure. I mean, they noted on the broadcast today, like, notice the huddle where you're seeing guys are more tuned in, they're more active. I know we talked about this earlier in the year about the huddles were just a mess and nobody was paying attention. The coaches were tuned out. It's completely different now. This team has motivation. This team has a fighting sense to them late in this season, and whether it's rallying around Mike Woodson in his final season or not, maybe it's just trying to get yourself into the NCAA tournament. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, they've got to keep it up because it's working.
Yeah, I just like, and you're right about the whole huddle thing. And even in the second half when he gets up big, like you're seeing like Renew like talking to one of the assistants or just outside of the huddle trying to figure out like positioning. And I thought Indiana set up both Renew and Balo so well down low. That early pass over the top really set the tone. It's like that's what I want Indiana to do. Run the floor. Balo's, defensively, there are times where he moves poorly, but he gets up and down the floor at a pretty decent pace, and that's something that's gone underrated. And he did that at Arizona as well. I'll give him credit for that. But just having that pass over the top, and there are times like mouse in the house, throw that ball up top and give him the easy two. And that Renew poster was like, oh man, it was like kind of in slow motion. Like, did that just happen? Like, yeah. But I was jazzed up for that. But you're right. Just everyone, they're on the same page, and even when they're up big, they're still fine tuning everything. And I think they're being perfectionists now, and you have to when trying to get the little things right because that's what it's all about. At this point in the year, you're fine tuning some things, and you're just doing that at the right time, and you know that you're knocking on the door of a lock for the not a lock, but you're knocking on the door of being safe for the NCAA tournament even before you go to that Big Ten tournament. So, I think if you get the final two, I think you're in really good shape, not having to worry about what would be a Thursday game in the Big Ten tourney. So just the effort and the overall just the mental awareness and everyone's focused. Everyone's on the same page, and even when things don't go right, you don't notice that. You could tell body language, coaches, players, like everything when it went wrong, and everyone was tuned out. But communication on the court, I think, has been much better as of late. I remember there was that one baseline spin that Balo had that completely left his man. I don't know if it was Osabor or somebody else. Completely left him in the dust. Dribbled baseline, got fouled, missed the shot. I remember Renew. I could hear it on the broadcast, be like, "Great move, man!" Like even though he missed the chance at the end one, it's like that's what the little things that you pick up on that you just didn't in the first half of the year, just because they were so discombobulated. And I know that the injury Renew changed a lot of his season and all of that. But if you get everyone healthy, like these are the guys you need, and you don't have to have everyone playing at 100% every game. We've seen that this year in that Purdue game. Not everyone, there was like six guys that played that entire second half. There was no Mackenzie Mbako in that second half. You had basically everyone today doing something, except for like Balo, who was quiet, but it didn't feel that way.
Yeah, and all of this has to be sustainable into the last two games of the year. It's Ohio State and Oregon, and they are 32 and 33 in the net as of now before it's going to be updated. And in the Ken Palm, let's see, 32 and 33. So those are both going to be quad one games. I think if Indiana wins one of those, just one, I think they'll be pretty safe. If they win both, I think they would be more than safe in the NCAA tournament, barring something crazy. But Indiana's moved up to 46 in the Ken Palm ratings, and the net hasn't been updated yet, but I would assume they'd probably move up into the high 40s, low 50s. They're at 57 right now. But I think just one of the two is all Indiana needs.
Yeah, I've said all along, like 20 was the number that I looked out for before. After that Michigan State win, it's like, all right, now that you have some momentum behind you, if you get to 20, you're in good shape. And I still believe that. And I would not have thought coming into this game that Indiana would be on the right side of the bubble. But that's just kind of the way that it's been this year. And I said last time, like, I was shocked at the Michigan State game that Indiana was back on the bubble. I thought they were like still out of it a little bit, but that's just the kind of I guess how top heavy that this sport is in this year, and especially with the SEC having so many good teams, and the Big Ten feels like has four really good teams, or maybe five, and then everyone else kind of there's a pretty big drop off, I think, in terms of potential at least. But regardless, like it depends because Ohio State is a home game, and right now they're just outside the top 30. So right now it would be quad two. So it depends on kind of what happens before then. But I think like you get two more wins in some way, you're in the tournament. I think if you get three in some way, then you avoid playing in Dayton, which we know what happened in Mike Woodson's first year. You play in Dayton, the whole travel nightmare going out west to Portland, and we all know what happened against St. Mary's. So you'd love to avoid playing in Dayton. I was under the assumption that when I was thinking about, okay, like would I rather have Indiana like play in that Wednesday game and have a chance to pick up an extra win? Looking at the bracket which they showed today, which had Indiana as the 8-9 against Oregon, and there's a good chance if Indiana wins one of the last two, then it would be against Oregon in that 8-9 game, whichever way the seeds are, you don't care. But like the one is Michigan right now, and the four is Maryland. So like I am perfectly fine with going against the two bigs. I want to avoid Michigan State and avoid Wisconsin at all costs, be on the other side, and no matter what it takes, if you have to play in a Wednesday game, just whatever path I think is favorable, I think works. But then yet again, I'd much rather, feels like have the chance of playing a quad one game on a neutral site, which would really be a home court advantage, as we mentioned for IU in Indianapolis. But looking at that bracket they showed today, I'm like, boy, I am like, sure you'd have to play that first game on a Thursday at noon, but if you're playing Oregon, that's a 9 a.m. local tip for them. So I'm all for that. And at this point, it's like, give me Oregon that 8-9 game, and the heck with it. I'd be happy to play Michigan next in that next game, considering Indiana can play against the two bigs and play with some of the best in the Big Ten.
Yeah, the Big Ten tournament is going to be really interesting. It's very nice that we don't have to worry about if they're going to make it or not now, because that is pretty much a lock, I would think.
It is, yeah.
It is
Yep.
statistically.
hmm
Okay. So that makes me feel good. Um, Now as to who they would play, I'm right with you. I think Oregon would be a great matchup. I'm really interested to see what happens next week to see how Indiana plays Oregon because those are two teams that you don't really think about the matchup between. Um, and for Indiana, they're already going to be out west, so they're going to be used to the time zone. But when Oregon comes to Indianapolis, that would be a little bit different. And Indiana fans, we know they take over Gainbridge Fieldhouse for those neutral site games. Now, do those neutral site games always go the way that they should? No. Especially with Indiana. Indiana's always had trouble with those. But in the Big Ten tournament, yeah, I want to see the teams that Indiana has not necessarily already beaten, but teams that Indiana has played well and has proven that they can stick with. So you bring up a great point with Maryland. Like Indiana was one bad inbounds play away from potentially beating Maryland, also with a potential travel call in there too. Michigan, Indiana could hang with. Michigan's right now as the one seed, so that wouldn't be that bad. If there is any one seed to face, Michigan wouldn't be terrible at all. If Indiana ends up seeing Purdue again, Indiana's proven that they can either like stay with Purdue on the road and they can beat them well at home. Um, yeah, I think I would put this current Indiana team up with most teams in the Big Ten at the way that they're playing right now. Wisconsin, no. Michigan State, they're a little bit different than when Indiana beat them a couple weeks ago. So I would stay away from that, like you said. But I'm not seeing many teams that I would shy away from in the Big Ten tournament if I'm Indiana.
Yeah, I just, especially the way IU is playing, like, I don't know who would actually like legitimately want to face Indiana in Indianapolis. And kind of like looking at the standings right now, like UCLA, I'd be happy playing them. Oregon, Purdue. I mean, Wisconsin's the one team I just think is a matchup nightmare just because they're too bigs. And Michigan is tough. Like Indiana, like really was kind of had a late surge at the end and wasn't necessarily with Michigan for a whole lot of that game at Assembly Hall, albeit. Um, but other than that, it's like, man, I'm fine seeing anybody else, and the teams below. It's like neutral site is just so much different. Everything changes, and we saw against Penn State at the Palestra what a neutral site game does. Like the shooting numbers are so much different, and yeah, I'm actually looking at the numbers now. Like everyone has essentially 2 games left. Indiana does for sure. If Indiana beats Ohio State, they are actually, I believe, will clinch a spot for a Thursday game. Because right now Indiana's 9-9, 2 games left. Ohio State is 8-10. And so if you beat Ohio State, even if you lose that other game, you'd have the tiebreaker over them. And the other teams have 7. So if Indiana wins one more, you get to 10. Everyone else is 7-11 right there. So that means they only have 2 games left. So if you beat Ohio State, you are for sure playing on Thursday the Big Ten tournament. So that's as easy as it gets. That I'd feel thrilled about. I don't really care what way the one is. Like Michigan State could be the one. I think it's really between them and Michigan, and I think they have to play again if I'm not mistaken. They've already played once, played at the Chrysler Center, and Michigan State came out with the win, even though Vlad Golden proposed to his girlfriend afterwards, which is kind of funny, but obviously good for him. But I think Michigan and Michigan State do have to play again. So that could change. I'd obviously rather that next game face Michigan than Michigan State. But I mean, like at this point, like if you're gonna come in hot, winning what would it be 4 of the last 5, assuming they get one of these next 2, and do play Thursday, give me that noon game again. We know what happened in Mike Woods' first year. They went into that 8-9 game with a little bit of expectations. You beat Michigan in that game, the huge comeback, and obviously we all know, how it ended. So disappointing in the with the Bohannon shot, but I'll take that path again. No worries about it.
I think the Big Ten tournament, like, do I expect Indiana to win the Big Ten tournament or make a deep run to the championship? No. But if they can use the Big Ten tournament to pick up one more quad one win, maybe two at the most, that would really be all I would need out of it. Anything more than that would be a pleasant surprise for me if they make it to the championship or even end up winning it. Um, I think they should use it as a tool. Obviously try and win it. That it's not what I'm not discouraging them from winning the Big Ten tournament. But at the minimum, at least pick up a quad one win, solidify that resume a little bit more because it if Indiana comes all this way to fight back into the conversation of the bubble, the NCAA tournament, and then blow it late and ultimately miss it, that would just be so discouraging and it would send Mike Woodson out on the wrong foot. And really, I just want to see this team succeed more than anything. I think the guys like Leo Galloway, Goody, I think they deserve it. Um, Same with like Balo, really everybody on this team, but the seniors in particular, these leaders on this team that have stepped up, that have turned the season around, they deserve to play in the NCAA tournament. They deserve to see what postseason basketball is like playing for their school. Um, and if they just have to find a way to get there, I just want to see it.
All it takes, I think, is 2 wins, which I think is very attainable. Oregon's kind of been they've been up and down this year. They're playing better. Okay, they've won 5 straight. Not just better as of late. They're one of the hottest teams in the Big Ten. Pardon me, but they've had some rough stretches. I mean, they're 1, 2, 3. Okay, they've lost 5 straight. Now they've won 5 straight. So I mean, that is just like as streaky as it gets. And they lost to. They lost to Nebraska on their home floor. They got smoked by Illinois. They lost to Purdue. I mean, it's like this is a team that can lose at home. Like there's no doubt about it. But it's kind of you got to see what Indiana's made of, and there's a very good chance you're seeing this team again in a few weeks. So I mean, you can put whatever you want into that game. Obviously, a win would be huge, especially if IU wants to avoid playing in Dayton. But it is what it is. Like everyone's on the same page, everyone's rolling, and there's a lot of coaches would admit an Indiana team is not a team you want to see get hot. And I don't think we've said this really in some years past, but I just think with the true talent that this team has, and whether it is rallying around Woodson or not, like it's a different team. They've been playing much better, and obviously the system has been much better with the lineup construction and the minutes just distribution. But I mean, hey, everyone else in the bubble did not look very good today. Like Nebraska lost to Minnesota. There were some other teams that went down. I know everyone's now tweeting out like, "Oh, here's the team you should root for when IU is not playing." It's like, all right, I'm not completely like that insane quite yet. Although it is March, so maybe I'm wrong in that sense. But You don't have to quite, go scoreboard watching for everybody else. If IU keeps winning, then you're not going to have to worry about many other teams because 20 gets you in. There's no doubt about that. And I think 21, you can maybe avoid playing in Dayton. And I know that the committee has never truly valued the Big Ten tournament wins as much as anything else, just because I think they think the regular season and the true home road games matter more than a neutral site game. But regardless, like you're playing all these potentially quad one games in Indianapolis, so that definitely does matter.
I think crowds are a big thing to talk about in these last couple games because let's be honest here, Matthew Knight Arena is not the greatest home atmosphere in the world. And then if doesn't matter what happens there. Last game of the year against Ohio State, which will probably end up being the biggest game of the year, it's going to be a whiteout at Assembly Hall with stakes at hand, and students staying around. It's not quite spring break yet. It wouldn't be by that time. It's going to be an atmosphere. So you go from an opportunity. I mean, we saw at Washington today. Indiana fans kind of made their presence known. It's the second largest alumni base in the United States out of all colleges. Indiana fans will pop up, they'll travel, they'll find ways to get to road games. But that home game against Ohio State, that is going to be some atmosphere, and that should hopefully propel Indiana to a win.
It should, yeah. That'll be an emotional night for sure. I don't know if Woodson's gonna like say anything or anything like that, or if it's just gonna be the usual like seniors go up and say something. But the ovation for Galloway will be great, and the ovation for Ballo I think will be fantastic. And I mean, Hey, bring earmuffs, man. If when Anthony Leo goes up to talk, because boy, I don't know what he's gonna say. I know last year was pretty short when he said I don't have to give this speech until next year, but that time is about to come. So that place might explode when he gets that microphone, and maybe Luke Goody says something. Maybe he's trying to come back for another year. Who really knows? But all those guys are playing like it's their last season, and the effort's there, and I'm bummed I won't be there for senior day, but it'll be a fun atmosphere, and I'm sure there's not going to be a dry eye in that place. But then yet again, it'll be a better atmosphere if Indiana can win against Oregon and add that extra quad one win. And I don't know who Ohio State plays before then. I can quickly take a peek because I assume they have another game, at least one before. Well, obviously they do because it's the last game of the regular season. They have home against Nebraska. Okay, that's not a real needle mover in terms of quad one versus quad two, but he did keep that game close enough against Penn State to the point where he kept it to a quad one win on the neutral site and a quad two win at home instead of having going quad two, quad three. So, even Mike Woods is potentially playing the mind games here and looking at the computer metrics to see what really matters. No, just kidding. But who knows? Hoping for some movement as well to potentially get that Ohio State game to quad one as well.
There's so much to take in, all these other teams, computer rankings. It all reminds me of week 18, week 17 of the NFL slate, where you're looking at other teams and who they're playing and what they're doing. That's what makes March so much fun. And on the first day of March, we were treated to a great Indiana win that opened up some doors for the rest of the month, where hopefully we'll see a lot more of Indiana basketball. Austin, final thoughts after these past two wins where Indiana's won three straight now over Purdue, Penn State, and Washington.
Last time IU won three straight was that 5 game winning streak to start the kind of at the end of 2024 and to start 2025. So it's just kind of like the mindset is reset just like that. And it's crazy what one second half against your rival can do potentially for your season. And it's fun. It's rewarding to see games where you're winning, basically the game's not even competitive really for the other team. And it's fun to watch. This team is even like when they don't necessarily win, like this is still an enjoyable team to watch because of the style they're playing, and because of the rotations and everything else that is going on. And it's hard to root against this team, and hard to root against the guys. There's not, I don't think, many unlikable players on this team, personality wise, and Anthony Leo's a great feel good story, and Goody obviously transferring to Indiana and Galloway staying for another year. Like there's a bunch of guys that are hard to root against, and obviously Miles Rice, God, what a story they touched on the broadcast. Like not a lot of guys you can really dislike on this team, and I think that's what makes them, and why the fan base was so eager for this team to get it right and for them to turn it around. Because just the construction last year, it just wasn't the case.
No, it's been great to see the season turn around. It's been great to see people get hope back again. Like you think back to the Illinois game where fans booed Indiana off the floor at halftime. You think back to all the Fire Woodson chants at the games, and now it's like, all right, let's rally around this team. Let's get them in the tournament. They're winning games. They just blew out Purdue. They've won three straight. There's some momentum here. And it's been great to see that. I know it's going to continue and I think it's going to grow because I know how Indiana fans work. When one person or a couple people do things, it catches on and it snowballs quickly within the Indiana basketball fan base. But it should be an exciting rest of the month. We'll be back as Indiana continues its stretch of the two final games of the year. But there's a lot to be considered for the rest of the month and beyond. But until then, Indiana beats Penn State, beats Washington back to back. That's what we covered today. And we'll be back for Oregon and Ohio State in the final two games of the season. For Austin, I'm Ian. This has been